How is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Down Podcast, where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. The Bears escape Minneapolis with a 33-27 nail-biting win over the Minnesota Vikings, putting them back into playoff contention. Today, we are back with our Week 15 postgame show, breaking down the win, giving you guys our instant analysis and thoughts on the win over the Vikings that brings the Bears back to 500 and puts them at 7-7. I am your host, Chris Malpe, repping a Trubisky jersey for one of the last times ever, probably. I am joined with my co-hosts to the right of me, Parth and Jaylen McClinton. Jaylen's eating the camera, but Parth, guys, how's it going?
It feels good. Like you said, the Bears want a must-win matchup against the Vikings. It's always fun to beat down on the little brother. But yeah.
Feels great. I know most of these people who are watching this video were just in the stream. Me and Chris almost had heart attacks. But it was just great to see the Bears pull out a win.
Yeah, and that was incredible. Now, obviously, the focus turns to the Cardinals. They can lose any of their last 3 weeks, but obviously, as Bears fans, we would prefer if it's earlier so that the Bears can control their own fate. But the Cardinals are up 9-0 on the Eagles, so that's not looking the greatest right now. But the Bears are in a good spot to make the playoffs. All the Bears need to do to make the playoffs now is win their last 2 games and have the Cardinals lose one of them to the 49ers or the Rams or possibly today against the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we talk more about this game, let's run through the stats. First off, for the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins, 24 for 35, 271 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception, sacked 3 times, and a passer rating of 98.6. A pretty good game for Kirk Cousins, I would say. Dalvin Cook absolutely gorged us on the ground. 24 carries, 132 yards, a touchdown, a long run of 20 and 5.5 yards per carry. The Vikings, as a team, had 158 rushing yards. Through the air, it did look tough for the Bears. Justin Jefferson, 8 catches, 104 yards. Tyler Conklin scored his first touchdown, 3 receptions for 57 yards for him. Also, Adam Thielen got in with 1 touchdown and had 2 catches for 11 yards. Taking a look at the Vikings defense, Eric Wilson, 11 tackles. Anthony Harris was 7. And that is about it. Let's take a look at the Bears because it was a good day for them offensively. Mitchell Trubisky, 15 for 21, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The only bad play Mitch made the entire game, he had 2 bad throws, I would say, 1 thrown into triple coverage for Jimmy Graham. Jaylen, I know you remember that throw where I said it should have been picked. And then, obviously, the very forced throw in the end zone, it would have been it was J.P. Holtz's first target of the season. Why was he in? I have no clue, but it was intercepted by Cameron Dantzler, and Mitch stared it down the entire time. But he was only sacked 1 time, had a passer rating of 97.7. David Montgomery on the ground, easily the player of the game for me, 32 carries, finally giving him that workload he deserves, 146 yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, and that's a career high in yards for him with a long of 19. Trubisky also added 8 rushes for 34 yards. Looking at receivers, even though it was primarily a rushing day with 200 of the rushing yards coming, contributing to the total on offense and only 202 receiving yards, Allen Robinson did have a good day, averaging 20.8 yards per catch, 4 receptions for 83 yards. He had a big one in the first quarter, also a 35-yarder to put the Bears in Cairo Santos range before Mitch obviously turned it over in the fourth quarter. Darnell Mooney, 4 receptions, 49 yards, and a score. Cole Kmet with 2 catches for 12 yards, and Jimmy Graham with 2 for 25. Defensively for the Bears, great day for Danny Trevathan, 11 tackles and a pass defended. Eddie Jackson with 7 tackles and a pass defended. Khalil Mack and Brent Urban each reeling in a half of a sack. Bilal Nichols reeling in 2 half sacks to combine to 1 with 7 tackles on the day. And Sherrick McManus with the 1 interception to close it off. Guys, what a nail-biter. It came down to the end. The Bears' defense was a liability, especially throughout the second half, letting Minnesota back in it. And we knew that the Bears were going to win the game if they could make a stop. They finally made it at the end. Me and Jaylen, you mentioned it earlier, had a heart attack at the end. That ball was tipped up by Eddie Jackson. Whether it was on purpose or accident, I would assume it's an accident, picked off by Sherrick McManus, but it came down to the final play. So, Parth, you weren't in the stream, so I want to hear your thoughts first. What's your initial reactions to this win, and do you think the Bears are putting themselves in a good spot heading into Jacksonville?
I'd say we're in a pretty good spot. Heading into Jacksonville, I think the offense is playing pretty well. Looking back, the offense is, I think, with Mitch Trubisky in, almost averaging upwards of 28, 29 points per game, I think the last 4 games. So that's a bright side. And the defense, yes, we have been giving up a lot of points, but they're making the key plays. They made the key plays today when it was needed. Yes, they've been breaking, but against Jacksonville, I feel a lot better. That offense isn't as good as Minnesota's, and we were down today with a couple injuries, and especially with the cornerbacks. Buster Screen being out, I guess, hurted the team, I guess you could say, and so did Jaylen Johnson being out hurts the team. But I think the team definitely played well today. It was great to see them win, especially a must-win game. I thought Trubisky played well, and then David Montgomery. I think I said he's going to be he looked like a top 10 running back. Said again, he looks really good. He's fun to watch. I think he's evolving, and he's growing right in front of our eyes, so that's fun to watch as well.
Yeah, and Jacksonville doesn't look great. They won their week 1 game against the Colts. They've lost 13 straight, and the Bears definitely don't want to be a team that loses to them. But I like our odds next week, obviously. Just talking about this game specifically, what a great game from the offense. And even Mitchell Trubisky, even though he did throw that interception, which was easily probably the worst play of the game, the defense was shaky. I think getting Jaylen Johnson back will be good. Jaylen and I were discussing it throughout the stream. We thought, for the most part, Duke Shelley looked pretty good. You can still see that Kindle Vildor needs some time, and both of them at some point showed why they aren't starting. But I do think Duke Shelley's done a pretty darn good job, except for allowing that touchdown to Thielen with a miscommunication in the first quarter. You know what? The defense is going to have to step up, I think, depending on what Green Bay does week 17. I would hope the Bears beat the Jaguars. But I think it'll be a good game for the defense next week, getting their confidence back against Gardner Minshew and a team that obviously is tanking so they can pick Justin Fields second overall. You know what? I think it was a good game for the Bears. We saw the run game evolve. We saw why David Montgomery deserves carries, and we saw a glimpse of what David Montgomery looks like with a good offensive line. And that really stood out to me. I think the Bears are going to look hopefully to get 1 or 2 more new tackles next year. And David Montgomery was incredible. Greg Jennings, who was commentating, was saying it throughout the game. He was shedding off tackles. He was able to break some long runs, and we were running pretty relentlessly on them even up until the end of the game. So it was great to see Montgomery have a good game. Trubisky also pretty solid there. And, overall, that's the third straight game where the offense, I think the offense is averaging 33 points per game in their last 3. And that's what we've wanted to see all season. And of course, the defense gets a little debunked right when the offense is pulling it together. But I think hopefully when they head down to Jacksonville, it'll be a good game for them to rebuild and hopefully put a pounding down on the team they face in week 16. So Jaylen, before we move on to our offensive and defensive players of the game, what were your thoughts on this one? Obviously, you were in the live stream with me. We almost had heart attacks, but we were feeling pretty good throughout the entirety of that game. So what are your thoughts on it?
So first of all, as Eagles fans, we're not looking very good right now. They're down 16 to 0 to the Cardinals. But
there's 2 more weeks.
Talk a little bit about this one. Talking a little bit about this game. Like I said, we were in the live stream. Basically everybody see my live reaction to some of the plays, even though it wasn't really live because I knew what happened, due to Chris being ahead of me. But the offense played extremely well, 20 points in the first half. We were able to score 13 in the second half. Scoring a touchdown in the third quarter helped us. I was happy to see that we can actually score in the third, something that we haven't did basically all season. So offense played well. David was fantastic. Over 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. I just tweeted that he's 94 yards away.
94 away from 1,000.
94 yards away from 1,000 yards. And who would have thought 5 weeks ago we would be saying that David's looking at potentially as a 1,000-yard runner? So he's been the workhorse of this offense. We've won games these last couple weeks, just off being on his back and him having amazing games. So it's just good to see. The defense was a liability today. A lot of open receivers. Tackling was bad, but we got stops when we needed to. We got a huge 4th down stop early in the game. When we stopped Dalvin Cook, then we got the 4th down to give us the ball back, and obviously the interception to win the game. So defense showed up when it needed to. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Make plays to help your team win the game. But other than that, I'm just extremely excited and happy that we were able to pull this game out.
Yeah, and David Montgomery is one of 4 running backs in the NFL to have 700-plus rushing yards and 300-plus receiving yards, at least through this week, alongside Joe Mixon, James Robinson, and obviously Dalvin Cook. Actually, that might be Derrick Henry. I'm not sure if it's Joe Mixon. I don't know why I said that. But anyways, heading into our offensive and defensive players of the game, offensively, I feel like it has to be all across the board, David Montgomery. What a game for him. I thought he was going to have a big game. I said it when I was doing the pregame show with Parth. My key factor was to get David Montgomery going. The Bears did exactly that. They weren't one-dimensional when they were throwing the ball. A majority of the time it worked. And what a game for Montgomery. 4.6 yards per carry, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. I was hoping he would punch one more in at the end. Jaylen was too, so he could have a career high in touchdowns and yards. But also even, he had 1 catch for 16 yards as well. He proved that he's good with a good offensive line and that he can help this team win and become less one-dimensional. And we saw it work against Minnesota. He is the reason why we won this game wholeheartedly. The defense struggled, and when the offense needed to look for something, they looked for David Montgomery to pick up some chunk plays. So my offensive MVP easily is going to be David Montgomery in this one. Jaylen, I'm going to pass it back around to you right now. I assume we're in agreement here.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. Like Mitchell play well.
Chill out.
Mitchell played well, obviously, other than the interception, but it's David by far. David, 2 touchdowns over 100. I think he had like 148 of 149 on 32 carries. We finally gave him the ball over 30 times. Didn't think Laser was going to do that because Nagy definitely was not going to do that if this was 5 weeks ago. Give David Montgomery 32 carries, but obviously when we get from over 20 plus, 25 plus, it works out for us in the long term. And yeah, it's David by far. He's been the MVP over the last, I want to say, month.
Parth, we 3 for 3 here?
Yeah, that's easy. I mean, come on. David Montgomery had one of his best games. Had his best game. He's looking really great. Like Bears fans, we should be excited about this guy. As the Bears bring in a better offense lineman, I think he's going to get better, and it's just a start.
I'm glad my take of him being over a 1,000-yard runner. It's not good anymore because I'll definitely feel like he'll be there next week.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's head into defensive MVP of the game. I think there's maybe only 1 or 2 picks you can make here, but I'm going to go with Danny Trevathan. A lot in the first half, not so much in the second half. We saw him making a ton of big tackles. It's been an up and down season for Trevathan. He's had some games where he's gotten embarrassed. He's had some games where he's made some big stops. And when it came to holding Minnesota to 10 in the first half, Danny Trevathan made some huge tackles on Dalvin Cook. Obviously, he ended up gashing us, especially in that second half. But Danny Trevathan made some big tackles in this one. Also had a pass defended. No one really stood out on the Bears defense. Robert Quinn did have another strip sack, was recovered by Minnesota, but it was nice to see him have a couple tackles and finally come back to life 13 weeks later. But my defensive MVP of the game is going to be Danny Trevathan in this one. So, Jaylen, I'm going to toss it back around to you. The Bears' defense struggled in this one, but if you had to choose someone, who would your defensive player of the game be?
I'm going to go Bilal Nichols. I wouldn't say flying because he's a defensive lineman, but he was definitely everywhere on the field, making sacks, tackles for losses. He got that huge tackle for loss on Dalvin Cook. On 4th down, was able to stop him short and give us the ball back with in fair range, and we ended up getting points out of that. So I'm going with Bilal. Jay Rogers has definitely helped this defensive line vastly. Like he's made Bilal look like a very good nose tackle, even though he struggled at the beginning of the season. But as the season progresses, he's obviously picked it up. He's getting sacks, tackles for loss, tackles in the backfield. It's Bilal for me.
Yeah, and that's a good pick. As he's continued to get his feet wet, he's showed why he is worthwhile for this team to continue to have in their plans moving forward. Jaylen and I talked about this in the live stream, but if Akeem Hicks does go, and he's definitely a candidate for someone who could get traded or cut this offseason because he's in a contract year, he's going to ask for a lot of money. We're going to have Eddie Goldman back next year, hopefully, if this virus still isn't sticking around and obviously the vaccine and stuff gets out. But Bilal Nichols has proved his worth to this defense, and I think he only exponentially gets better as we move forward. It was a great game for him, and especially the second half of the season. We've continued to see Nichols make plays and plays and plays, and I couldn't be happier. So, Parth, I'm going to pass it back around to you, Rao. I mentioned it earlier, not the greatest game defensively, and the defense hasn't really stepped up in a couple weeks outside of the Houston game. But who would your defensive player of the game be in this one?
Yeah, the defense has, bended a little bit here and there, but I think Bill Nichols definitely was the player of the game. Like Jaylen said, he's been playing really well the last couple of weeks. He's getting better as his feet get wet. He had 3 quarterback hits today. He's just getting a lot of pressure, and the Bears have had some tough time getting pressure, and I think he's been getting pressure. Shout out to Robert Quint is showing up though.
Yeah, finally good to see Robert Quinn show
Yeah.
up. Before we close this one out, and this is how we always do it, we talk a little bit about what we think needs to improve moving forward. Obviously, we can all agree the Bears have a favorable matchup moving forward against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but depending on what happens in Week 16, the Bears could be playing the Packers' bench players in Week 17 or their starters, and I'm not blowing past Jacksonville whatsoever, but I'm going to start off by saying you have to do a better job of containing the run against Jacksonville. We saw Dalvin Cook gash us. We've seen other running backs do it throughout the season, Aaron Jones, but we've also seen the Bears do a good job at containing running backs. Dalvin Cook the first time was held under 100 all-purpose yards. We did a good job against Derrick Henry. We did a good job against Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. But the Bears, I think the Jaguars' only hope is running the ball. No offense to them. They have some decent wide receivers, but Gardner Minshew's at quarterback, and that defense is really shaky. I'm not saying the Bears are going to run away with it by any means. This is the National Football League. Anyone can beat anyone on any given day. But we've seen the way that the Jaguars are trending, and you're going to have to stop James Robinson. I think he's the best player on that offense, an undrafted rookie. He has shown why he deserves to be a good back in this league, and I think he's only going to continue to excel moving forward. So kudos to him. But the Bears are going to need to shut him down.
Before we get to and I know you're getting too far ahead into Jacksonville, but before we get too far ahead, like you said, anyone can win on any given day, and the Jets are currently up 13-0.
Yeah, I saw that on the Rams. Yeah,
so,
that shows you any team can beat any team on any given day, and that would be a blowout. So. You still have to come in. You still have to take it seriously, and stopping James Robinson is going to be a huge part to that. I've said it already. I think he's the best player on their offense. He's good as a running back. He can also work as a receiving back, and he's had quite the season for someone who's coming into the league as an undrafted rookie, and he's going to be there to stay for quite some time. Leonard Fournette's replacement, I guess you could say so. You have to do a better job stopping the run next week. I think it'll be easier against the Jaguars. Their offensive line is a little bit worse than that of Minnesota. But guys like Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan, Akeem Hicks, Bilal Nichols, and even all the backup guys. I didn't even mention Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn, but even all the backup guys that were stepping up today. John Jenkins had a couple good plays. Brent Urban, all those guys are going to have to step up if the Bears want to beat the Jaguars. And I think stopping the run has to be one of the highlighted points heading into next week because James Robinson is a darn good back. Parth, I'm going to pass it to you now. It's tough to think that this game against Jacksonville can be tough, but you mentioned it. The New York Jets are winning right now after blitzing everyone on a Hail Mary a couple of weeks ago and effectively losing that game. So Jacksonville might actually be in the race for the number 1 pick soon, but what do you think the Bears have to improve on moving forward if they want to give themselves a chance to move back above 500 next week and beat the Jaguars?
Like we said, the Bears got to be better on the run D and just got to run the ball. I think the Bears are better at just, letting David Montgomery control the game. I think that we saw that this week, and that's what we got to do.
Yeah, and this was the first time in a while. I mean, the Houston game was a blowout, but we normally see the Bears become one-dimensional, and giving Montgomery the rock, as you mentioned, you said it a ton last week, Parth, giving him the rock 20-plus times is going to be huge if the Bears want to continue to win moving forward. And he showed his true worth today. I like the interior of the offensive line. Alex Bars has looked good. Same with Sam Mustipher. And Cody Whitehair was incredible today. Not much to say about the tackles, but I think he's going to be better with a better offensive line. So continuing to trust Montgomery in certain situations is going to be huge. So, Jaylen, before we close this one out, we live streamed today. We got to watch the entire game together. What do you think the Bears need to improve on heading into Week 16?
The defense. Surprisingly, I didn't think I would be saying that.
Jalen Johnson get healthy. That's what needs to improve.
Yeah, that too. The tackling too. I don't know what Pagano's been calling, but 27 points. Give up. Well, we had 7 points last week, but that was against a terrible Houston team, and then 34 to the Lions. You can't have that, especially if you were supposed to be the strength of this team. You were the strength of this team, and obviously since we've been on the losing streak, the defense has been worn down. We have a lot of veterans on this team, a lot of guys that that are past their primes or in their primes right now, getting up there in age, but still that can't happen. Like you said, if we want to continue this playoff run, or we play the Jags next week, I'm not really worried about them. But like you guys said, you can't put any team past in the NFL. And James Robinson is a very good, very good running back. He did get hurt this game, so I don't know if he even plays next week. Still, even if he does, he's a very good running back and can catch and run out the backfield. So something we definitely need to look forward to stopping. But that's pretty much about it. Obviously, there's nothing to say bad about the offense. The offense has done very well ever since Mitchell has been back to starting quarterback. But yeah, just tackle better and come out with some emphasis. Like we got to be better if we want to.
I think we can all agree that we want to put a beat down on the Jaguars next week, and that would be good. Yeah. Heading into a Week 17 game, that's one of the most, probably the most important, might be the most important game, depending on what happens with Arizona. Since the Bears obviously were in the wild card game in 2018. So we shall see how this plays out, but the Bears win 33-27 over the Minnesota Vikings, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our Week 15 post-game show. I would like to say before we close this one off, Jaylen and I, when we were in the stream, we said we were going to do a giveaway if we won, but an item that we were going to give away today is going to be added to our Christmas giveaway, which will be announced later this week. We're not going to be shipping out any of the stuff until probably around New Year's, but that's going to be added to the Christmas giveaway. So instead of giving away 2 things, we're now going to give away 3. And we will be back live streaming in Week 16 against the Jaguars. We're going to stream for the rest of the season, at least until the Bears lose, which darn well might come in Week 17. But once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you want more from us, head to our website, beardown.com. We're posting columns, articles, and blogs very soon, recapping the Week 15 win over the Vikings and getting you guys ready for the Week 16 game in Jacksonville. If you would like to find us on social media to enter those giveaways that I mentioned earlier, head over to Instagram and Twitter at beardown. Once again, we're announcing those next week, and it's going to be free to enter. So we want to get back to you guys as much as possible. So be sure to go check us out on social media. It also keeps you informed whenever we're posting new articles or podcasts or making any sort of announcements. One last thing before we close this one off, all of our social media pages are down in the description, Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to go check that out. It's a great way to interact with us. We're active on all of the platforms, and you get to see our opinions on other things NFL, other things, other places in the sports world. And it's just a good follow to see other opinions. Our specific opinions on the Bears. So, Parth, Jaylen McClinton, another nail biter today. It felt like we were back in the first quarter of the season with how that game ended off with our defense making a big stop. But any last words before we close this one out, guys?
I just saw on Twitter that Mitch Trubisky reached 10,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards this game. In 49 games, he did the fastest in Bears franchise history.
That tells you what you need to know about our quarterback. But yeah, Jaylen, any last words, buddy?
Mitch, we're going to be about that bread. He's going to lead us to a playoff.
It's the first time you've said that for what has to be 2 months.
Because he wasn't the starter. I wanted to say it back in.
He wasn't about that bread. No one was about that bread.
No kidding. For those 6 weeks, and those 6 weeks could come back to haunt us with some of the losses we had. But, today's win still gives the Bears a chance if they win out. Their playoff chances increase to 89%. So let's see if they can do it. We're going to get you guys our Week 16 coverage kicking off in just 1 or 2 days. So be sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel. And if you are returning to the channel and supporting us like you have all throughout this year and this season, do us a favor and drop a like if you made it this far on YouTube. Guys, it's been a pleasure to be your host. Once again, my name is Chris Malpe. Bears fans, enjoy the win. Enjoy the victory Monday for the 2nd straight week. And as always, do us a favor and stay safe and bear down. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.